to another show, Reseller Evolution. My name is Scott, and I'm here with
Carl.
Hey, Carl, how's it going, buddy?
It's going good. Another week.
This is our fourth podcast. Carl, can you believe it's fourth podcast already?
It goes quick. It goes quick.
So quick. So how's it going, buddy? How's your week in reselling going?
It's going good. You know, I have noticed a bit of the slowdown now. Like I predicted that usually mid-January for me, things start slowing down as everyone's spent their Christmas money and maybe their credit card bills are coming in. But that's okay. It means I have to ship less. I had the enjoyment of shipping something in a garbage bag the other day. Have you ever done that?
I have not. Now, I have seen Craigslist Hunter years ago recommend that for the bigger objects. Just wrap them up in a garbage bag. But I have never done it. How did that work out?
So this was like a pretty good sale. It was a water purifier for $100 American, and it came in its own big box. And no one's buying this water purifier for the box, but I don't like just putting a shipping label on it. So what I'll do is I'll take a big black garbage bag, and then I'll just tape the bejesus out of it, and I can slap a label on that. And I've shipped things very rarely that way, but it's pretty good. So I did that this week. That was exciting. Anything exciting on your end?
Well, I just want to ask you one question. Have you done that many times in the past, and have you ever received a complaint for that?
No, because I'm not going to do that with anything that the people care about the box for. In fact, usually what I do is if something comes in a box, like, you know, just a brown box or whatever, like the original packaging, whether it's not a collectible item, what I'll try to do is put a non-padded poly mailer around it. And I have some big ones you can get from eBay for that. But in this case, it was such a big box that I didn't have anything at home to pack it in the right size. And instead of going out and buying an even bigger box with more weight, more dimensional weight, I'll put it in a plastic garbage bag. It sounds worse than it is.
Yes.
Basically, it's like a black plastic wrap around it. And then you put eBay tape all around it. And then
because one of the things when I watched the show, and I'm going back years ago when I saw him do this, he talked about folding in the flaps or taping them down because it goes on a conveyor belt, especially if it's going over into another country. These things go on a conveyor belt, and you don't want anything to get caught in that belt.
Yeah, so I taped down all the sticky out bits. Like I put a lot more tape on this than I would a normal box I'm sending out. I guess, you know, hey, that's a risk. There's risk with any shipping. Yeah. But there's a practicality point too.
But you are conscientious about corners and all that kind of stuff.
I make sure the corners are down. Yeah.
Okay.
I make sure there's no sticking out bits to catch on stuff.
I myself have not done that. You know, it's not something I would be against. I just haven't had that item where I needed to do that. So
no, I wouldn't recommend it. Like this is that desperation, right? Like I forget what the size of this thing was. It's like, you know, 20 inches by 14 by 14. It was a very large item.
And do you use a certain type of garbage bag, like a heavy duty one?
Yeah, the heavy duty.
It's a heavy. All right. Anything exciting other than that? Like any?
I picked up a ephemera a lot. That's always kind of interesting with old 1940s. 1950s menus, matchboxes, playbills, a bunch of old 1910 postcards and stuff like that. I've been going through that. So that's it's interesting for me to go through it.
Yes.
And it is a lot of work though, because most of the stuff when you research ephemera, I find there's no really any comps.
Right. So sometimes I'll find stuff similar in when I do that kind of stuff and looking for comps, and sometimes you just make up your own. So what do you need to get out of that when you include shipping everything? My kind of threshold is around $30. Ephemera is usually inexpensive to ship, especially if it's like a magazine size or less, which is mostly the case. So you know, if you don't find something exactly like it, I kind of look for something similar age, similar kind of concept, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's what I'm planning on doing. It can be a little difficult. Well, I might even usually I don't use best offer on my listings. But in this case, I might, because it's so hard to figure out what the real range is for. But I'll probably sit over in the corner for a little bit before I get to it, to be honest.
Well, one of the things I've done, like I remember I bought, and I've told you about this, but I bought a bunch of letters, and they were from radio stations in the 1930s, and they were all over the states, and they were had letterhead, they were letters from the station, they were signed letterhead, they were in envelopes that they were mailed in with the stamp confirming age and all this kind of stuff,
Yeah,
and it was really hard to find comps at all and any of that kind of stuff. So I kind of listed it based on what I thought the collectability was. So if it had an interesting, and sometimes I would research, the person that signed it, that kind of thing, and very rarely, but in a couple letters, someone, not famous in the sense of a celebrity of Hollywood, but famous in the sense of in that radio world, right? Because it was a
yeah,
pioneer kind of era for radio stations. Um, I would determine like higher prices if that person had signed it, or was involved with it. If it was a radio station that was, in the infant stages then, but is big now, and a lot of them are still existing, and a lot of them aren't. But mostly, it was based on small little towns, right?
mm,
So there's little towns that don't exist anymore, and people collect that kind of stuff. Or there's cities, they were towns maybe back in the 30s, they were like kind of towns, and they've grown into big cities, and people collect the old stuff with the name of that town on it, or someone from that town that was, you know what I mean? So it's very
yeah.
collectible.
It's
Like
the
it's
same.
kind of the same as postcards, right?
Yeah,
So people
that's
look for old train stations or
yeah.
post
Um,
offices or buildings that
streets.
don't exist, but they
Yeah,
were in towns. So it's kind of the same idea.
100% with the postcards. That's what I was going to say. Is that I find the old postcards that just have like generic scenes don't sell as well. Like, I don't know, Mount Rushmore really hasn't changed a lot in 100 years,
Right, right.
or whatever the years are. But a city view, like especially if it's like completely gone, people like that sort of stuff. But
They like that stuff for sure. Yeah.
yeah, it just the problem with this stuff is it requires a lot of work. Especially, you get a big pile of it and you do a ton of work and it's like gone down like practically nothing because of each piece. And the other thing I might do in this case is if there's a theme, I might put a bunch of similar papers together just to try and bring up the average value of the lot. But yeah, so I'll work on that and that'll be fun.
All right, cool. For me, I guess I haven't been listening probably in the last, I'm going to say probably since Christmas. I haven't listed. I've been really working hard on the third booth. It's kind of pain in the butt in the short term, but in the long term, it's going to pay off. So I've been kind of working on that. I have lots of stuff here, but the way I had it set up here is everything was in boxes. So you don't really know what's in the boxes. And
No.
so you gotta, it's time consuming to go through each box. Some of the stuff's going to eBay. Some of the stuff is going to go to the booth, and some of the stuff just goes to garbage, right? So, kind of been working on that, and it's left eBay in the dust right now. But I still had a few sales. I got 2 items going out today, not big items. Around, I think one is a $60 and one is a $30 or $40 sale.
Hey,
But
nothing wrong there. That's still good sales for my
no, but it was probably 4 days ago since I had my last couple of sales. You know what I mean? So it has slowed, but I think it's because I haven't been listening, haven't been paying attention to it. But the sales at the booth, like we'll have a couple slow days. We had snow the one day. It was a bit of a blizzard actually around here with the wind and everything.
yeah.
So the whole morning and right until 2 in the afternoon was dead. I'm like, oh no, this is like a good day, right? But 2 o'clock, it just like bing, 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 bing. It's like everybody rushed the store at the same time. And then
Everybody.
Sunday followed up with a great day. So
Oh, so good.
I am so happy with the booth. It just hasn't disappointed me at all. So in the last probably year for sure, I haven't had a disappointing day.
Well, if people haven't checked it out, check out his Scotty's channel, Scott Sells Stuff, and you have an amazing video showing the your booths off with the best music ever, I think. So,
Well, it's funny, right? So Adam was shipping vintage after a live show one day. He was telling me about this AI
yeah,
ability.
yeah,
So we went on there. Well, I mean, we're through StreamYard, so it's not like he was here, but he was kind of guiding me through it, and we got ChatGPT to make up the lyrics, and then we went to another place that adds the music and the singing.
yep.
And I was really, really surprised at how
It,
good that turned out. So
it's catchy. It's
it's
catchy.
catchy, right?
Yeah,
So
AI is taking over. We're all doomed. But until then, it's pretty cool.
yes, yes. All right, Carl. Well, let's get into the show here. It looks like the
Yeah.
week was good for both of us here. And what topic are we talking about this week in the podcast?
So we're going to just talk about what we have decided to sell, how we figure out what to sell, what we have been selling over time. And because, when you start, it's hard to tell what you get overwhelmed with. What are you going to sell? So we thought we'd tell our stories and how we continue to evolve what we're going to sell. How did you? What was the first things you decided to sell and why? Because our paths were very complete opposites in a way.
Yeah. Well, I think the best way to start off is how I got into it.
Yeah,
My dad, well, my uncle is big into antiques. He's got some. I don't. He's also a collector of folk art, Canadiana stuff. But really, it was my dad who dabbled in it. He also had an antique booth, coincidentally, at the same place I'm at now. But I never paid attention to it. I never understood it. Never went to the antique store. Some of the items he had was neat, but that was about the extent of it. You just every now and then see a neat item. Um, and then he passed away probably, oh gosh, it's got to be going 11 years ago now. About a year after he passed away, he had some neat stuff in the house, and we filled up my garage with his stuff. A lot of stuff we threw out, and we're like kicking myself in the butt now because I'm like, what the heck did we throw out? Because we had a yard sale a year after he passed. We put his stuff down the center of the driveway. It was a long driveway. My sister had some stuff, so she put her side stuff on one side of the driveway. I put my stuff on the other. And again, my dad's was down the center. Everybody came picking for his stuff. All the stuff we thought was junk and old and garbage, but we just thought we'd throw it out there, see what happens. People were coming back 2 or 3 times. People said it was one of the best yard sales they've been to in a long time. And I'm like, what the heck? What's going on here, right? So I don't know. I don't know what the next step, but it was relatively quickly, like within a week or 2 or days or month, but it was definitely that same summer. And I just started watching some YouTubers going to yard sales, and I'm just thinking,
right.
I could do that, right? So it kind of started there, and then I liked storage units, and I decided to bid on a storage unit. It was online bid, got a storage unit, and it kind of just took off from there. We went to Toronto, picked it up, and then we had to get rid of the stuff. Like so we had a yard sale, right? We started selling stuff off, and then I did a few more storage units. I did some yard sales, and I ended up getting an antique booth. It was relatively small, and then it just exploded from there. So that was kind of how I started doing it. And I think because I started in an antique booth, I started looking for old stuff. Old stuff was what I was interested in. I learned a lot very quickly from the guys that were selling stuff there.
Yeah.
And at first, you kind of just pick everything old, and then you quickly realize not everything old has value. I was very cheap with what I was willing to pay for stuff because I really just didn't know. That's changed a little bit, but still, that is my main way I do things, is to buy things very inexpensively. I've said that before. And then I just expanded there. So I can tell you some what I started doing and then what I went into. But before I get into that, how did you start, and what kind of items were you doing?
Well, I have the same similar background. Like my parents always had antiques. There was a time period when I was really into the stuff when I was in maybe early 20s or 18 or something. And then I completely fell out of the interest sphere for me. And then I was talking to someone about how I wasn't really happy with what I was doing. He says, well, you should try selling stuff. I thought, wow, I don't like selling stuff. I don't like dealing with customers. And then I thought, well, I'll try the eBay. And then ever since then, I haven't looked back. And I get the thrill of buying stuff. And, I think what I've decided to buy was based on the same kind of criteria. It's like basically watched a bit of YouTube, went into the thrift stores, and just started looking stuff up, and a lot of what has influenced what I've decided to sell is like, I know you have your booth, so you can sell a lot of the stuff that has a variety of ranges of value and size, where I'd be more restricted on I need a certain value and a certain shippable size, has been basically what has configured what I'm gonna sell. What we decide to sell also, it helps if it's kind of in your wheelhouse of interests, but it doesn't have to be for me. So, Scotty, how do you decide what you want to sell? Like either in your booth or online? What makes you pick up an item and decide you want to sell that?
Well, when I first started, I kind of went with the concept of selling anything. Well, first of all, it was all about the price, but anything that was kind of old, because I was in the antique market. I wasn't on eBay at the time, although
No.
I would research things on eBay. I wasn't selling there. Um, Kijiji, and there was a thing called Let It Go or something like that to that effect, but it was apps on the phone, and Kijiji, which is now owned by eBay, but it's a Canadian thing, kind of Craigslist Hunter type equivalent. I was selling on those platforms. Yeah, so what I kind of started doing is things that looked old and interesting to me, and then it quickly expanded. Especially watching YouTubers was a big thing, but mostly it was the people that were also in the market. They were
Yeah.
so full of knowledge and passion for this stuff. Like it's very, and it, how do you say that? It's contagious. You know what I mean? Like you can feel their passion for all this stuff, and then quickly you appreciate things that are old, where before you usually don't unless you're into it. But toys, bottles, paintings, art. So I started getting into glass to a degree. I'm not fully knowledgeable in glass, but I can pick out some pieces that I think people are going to like. There's a few names. Got into folk art, got into basically certain looks of things. um Petroleum items like cans and signs, that kind of thing. Pop does very well, and it just what, I could sit here and list a ton of things, but basically it just continued to expand. What about yourself,
Right.
Carl?
I think for me is when I first started, it's like I just went to the thrift stores and started looking stuff up on my phone.
Okay.
And there's an advantage to that because I found a few bolos at the time that I think was less obvious to other people or they couldn't be bothered for. So, for example, one of my favorite things is remote controls because they're often cheap. You can find them. And there's ones worth 30, 40, $50. They're easy to ship, easy to store. There's model numbers on them. So that was a big, something I really liked. I found, as I've gone on, you develop your eye a little bit.
You definitely develop an eye and a knowledge base, because for whatever reason, and I guarantee every reseller that like yourself, that has been doing it for a long time and stayed
Yeah.
with it, for whatever reason, I can't remember to go get milk when I go to the store, but I don't forget a sale. I do not forget items. Those things go in the memory bank, and when I see them, I remember them. Are you the same way on that?
I wish my memory's not as good. I have to
Oh,
rerun the same thing over and over and over again.
yeah.
Once in a while, you'll be like, I'll go along and it's like, oh, I've seen that somewhere in a video somewhere that I should be checking that out. The funny one was this thing called scrubbing bubbles that I remember
Yep.
seeing
Yeah.
on a lot of videos at the time.
Yeah.
And now I'll always pick up a scrubbing bubbles. It's
Yeah.
just one of those hilarious things that sell for $50, $60 kind of thing, like plus shipping.
Well, I find it interesting. You said the remote control and the scrubbing bubbles, like that is so far from the antique booth. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You would never go to an antique store and see that. You might see a remote control because it's attached to a radio or a VHS
Yeah.
player or something like that. But
Yeah.
you would never, well, I'm going to sell this remote control. You could never do that in an antique store because nobody's looking. You have to sell those things on eBay. So it's really funny how and I think now, mainly because you got a booth, but I think also because you've been doing this for many years, we're kind of crossing paths. You know what I mean? Like we're
A
starting
little
to,
bit.
you picked up some ephemera. Would you have picked that up when you first started? Probably not. I don't
Probably
know.
not. No.
Right? So I wouldn't pick up scrubbing bubbles and remote controls. You know what I
Would
mean?
you pick up scrubbing bubbles now?
I probably would. I remember when I saw scrubbing bubbles, and it's just funny. But Lonnie and Candace from Shed Flips is where I first started seeing scrubbing bubbles.
Yeah.
But do they still hold the same value as they
They
used
come down
to?
a bit, but they're still worth selling. Yeah, it is.
Like,
It's kind of funny.
because I think it's like out, like it's retired, right? Like they don't do that. You can't get that anywhere else right
You
now.
know, honestly, a lot of the stuff I pick up, I go like, why on earth is anyone paying anything for this?
100%. 100%.
So I kind of given up trying to understand why people buy what I sell.
Yeah.
But that kind of brings us to a good point. It's like I think there's a couple of points I wanted to bring up. One is like, where Scotty lives and where I live, they're different markets. Like there's overlap, but where you live is a much older area than where I am. Like Ottawa, yeah, it was founded in 1890, but it wasn't really going until probably the 1920s, 1930s, and that's so we don't get as much history as you have there, and it's not like we can't find that stuff here. It's just that there's a lot more of that stuff where you are, and you're also more in a rural community than I am.
Yeah, I always felt fortunate. Just a vibe. It's not like I really even understand why now, but I always felt fortunate coming from this area because it's such a dynamic area and it's got such a rich history of stuff,
Yeah.
right? Like I've met people at antique shows 3-4 hours away, and we're getting a conversation, and I tell him where I'm from. He goes, I would pick there over anywhere else. Like he goes, that is one of the best places. Like it is just unbelievably rich with history. It's a farming community, so you got barns sometimes filled with this kind of stuff, right? Or basements, old farmhouses, all sorts of things. But yeah, I definitely feel fortunate to have this here. But I would also suspect if you stayed maybe out of the city, Carl, and kind of hit smaller towns, you might have to drive an hour away.
Right.
I would totally do that for yard sales. I've done that many, many times. Have you ever tried hitting some of those smaller towns? Like I would go closer to the 401. I would start heading towards the St. Lawrence River area and along there.
Yeah, I think it depends on like if I really want to pick that stuff up, because I'm very happy also picking up digital cameras, modern cameras, board games, like I said, the remote controls, cross stitch, that sort of stuff that I don't need to necessarily drive down to an hour. But you're right. You mentioned that area, and that's exactly what's being recommended to me by other people as well. If I want older stuff, go south, go to the St. Lawrence.
Go towards the St. Lawrence, like Cornwall or something like that. I don't know how far Cornwall is, but it's probably an hour from you, right?
Yeah, it's an hour.
Yeah, it's an hour. So I would hit anything along there. Is there Brockville? That's probably getting a little further away, but
a little further away, but still within reach.
Right. So hit those. I would hit those areas for sure. I think you got a few Indian reserves out there too. So you never know what you're going to find in there, but I think because you want to be where you don't want to be driving around once you drive an hour. I think I would start hitting the community yard sales if I was in that area and looking for the older things, and I think the prices would be more reasonable in a smaller town too, right? So that's just my experience as far as yard sales. So when you're trying to decide what you're looking for and where you're going to get it or find it, the best location for that, like how do you work that kind of stuff, Carl?
Well, what I like to do is like, we all came off with a base. A lot of people start with stuff they're already interested in. So for me, it was toys. I've always been into toys. But you can't just go to the stores and just start randomly looking at toys. Well, you can, but it's not very efficient, is it? If you're looking up every little thing. So what I will do a bit is actually research offline for what I'm going to look for. So the one category I like to joke about is, for example, Skylanders. But I this for different categories, including remote controls, sunglasses, even hats and stuff like that is what I find very useful, is finding the rare amongst the common. So what I mean by that is, the joke with the Skylanders is 95 or 98% of them have no value, right? But you see them all the time. And one thing I find helps is pick a category for, in this case, Skylanders. Go on eBay, look at solds, sort from highest to lowest, and see if that category that you've picked has any really standout values. And for Skylanders, there are ones that sell for 30, 40, 50, $60. And for a lot of people, they look very similar to the ones that sell for 50 cents, a dollar. So I will do that for different categories. And I try once in a while, I'll try to expand what I'm looking for. So, for example, one thing which I haven't done yet is sunglasses. And, some of them I know, of course, like Ray-Bans, I know, but a lot of them I don't. And so if I feel myself being a little stagnant in what I'm looking for, I will pick just a random category, something I actually see at the stores, go on eBay, see the range of what things sell for, and then I'll check to see which brands are the outstanding values of that brand, and I'll also check out the sell-through rate. So what that means is, like, what is the ratio of listed items compared to the number of sold items? Because what you don't want is, like, you see a few outside, like, really high sales, but there's so many listed that your chance of actually selling that category doesn't work. So I'll use that actually in my researching of new categories to sell in.
Yeah, well, I see. This is what is really neat, and there's so many different ways of resellers doing what they do, and I find you do you and do you find this as well? Do you find yourself like very, like, almost technical, like almost like very precise? Like,
Mm,
you like to write things down and record that. You know what I mean? Like,
I do that.
you wrote a book on Skylanders. We do tease you, but at the
Yeah,
same time, we're I think I'm going to speak for myself in a respectful sort of way, because you put your knowledge down. Like, I mean, you could really almost sell that, like, in a weird sort of way. You could do something on YouTube, or just the value of Skylander. Like, see, I don't have the patience to do that kind of stuff, or probably, I guess, the personality, right? Like, you know what I'm saying about that?
yeah. I think, for example, if you get things really cheap, then you can kind of do it by just buying stuff, and then you get the famous box lots from auctions where you get a bunch of stuff really cheap, and then you kind of learn, and that's one way of doing it as well.
And
But
I don't mean to interrupt there, Carl, but I just want to say, I think it's because of the booth, because it allows me to still have a way of getting rid of that stuff.
yeah,
I can display it, put it in the booth. People like their cheap items too, right? They come in there and they'll buy on impulse because it's a $5 item. I think the booth has subconsciously, without really going into deep thought about it until now, is it's conditioned me to be that kind of picker.
true. But when you go to a garage sale, you're not buying everything there. You're not like, just give me everything, right?
Well, because most of it is garbage.
Most of it's garbage. So how do you pick which amongst the garbage you pick?
Well, sometimes I've gone to yard sale, which is slash estate sale, but it's privately done. I filled up the entire truck before. So
Right.
to say I won't pick up, I'll pick whatever. Right? I don't need to go to 10 yard sales to call it a successful day. I think one yard sale can be successful in just picking up a ton of stuff. So basically anything kind of nostalgically and old. And collectible. So I know pops and beers, and so you got signs or trays, or
Right.
or light, or any
Yeah.
kind of decorative barware, light fixtures. I know any of that kind of old stuff, as long as it's in good shape. A lot of times it needs cleaning, so you got to be careful. If it's $15, you don't want to spend 2 hours cleaning it. But but a lot of like light fixtures and like I can go on and on and on, but I've bought entire libraries of books before. You know what I mean? Like 3,000 books. You know about that story.
Oh yeah, you
So
totally overpaid for those books.
oh, yeah, for sure. And so I bought 3,000 books. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
those things have been paying off in two ways. They've been paying off monetarily,
right.
unbelievably, and at the same time educationally, because I've learned what kind of books are desired. And if you kind of relate your books to everything else, over time you kind of feel, and it does change, the market does change, but
Right.
mostly in the value, not so much in the desirability. Some like Royal Daltons, they used to be huge monies, right? Now they've come down in money, but I can still sell Royal Daltons. You know what I mean? It's just I'm not going to get $100. I might get $40 for that item.
Right.
But I'm just saying that you can relate it to anything, that there's stuff out there that has value, and you just I don't know. It's just one of those things that just develop over time with me. And I again, like I said earlier, it just sticks in my head. I can't remember to get milk from the store. I can't remember to take the garbage out. But when it comes to yard sale stuff, like and stuff that or not yard sale stuff, but stuff that I resell, like I always remember those items.
I think it also reflects like the differences of how we came into this is too. Like I'm more of a cherry picker.
Yeah.
So I will buy things in bulk rarely. Usually what I'm doing is going in, picking that puzzle I know that's worth $100, picking that remote and worth is $30 or whatever, rather than going in and buying a big lot. And that's a reflection of the fact that I go to thrift stores. So, our techniques are a little different because of how we're sourcing. I think for me, I do a lot of, I should do more research, but I'm doing research because that's the situation I'm in for the thrift stores, where if I go in there, there's not really an opportunity. There's rarely an opportunity to buy in bulk like that. Usually everything is individually priced, individually bagged. And so what I need to do is go in there, figure out which parts of the store I'm going to look in and what to look for in those particular aisles, and know which brands are the ones to look for, especially for the newer stuff, because that's what I do a lot. So when I'm doing research at home, I'll make a list of the brands I want to buy. For example, a coffee maker. Like I'll want to know which brand names are the ones that are worth looking at, or which ones are Black and Decker that aren't worth looking at, or whatever, right? So for me, there's a different aspect of that as well. I think for me also, it's like, what's the chance of actually finding the items? Like if I go on like eBay and I'm looking up some like 18th century, I don't know, snuff box, well, the chance of me coming across that is really low, right? As opposed to like a modern coffee maker is much more higher. So it's like you have to kind of look at the market you're in. But I think what I have noticed is that people get stagnant, and that and this includes me, that they look for the same thing over and over and over again. And before they realize it, they're not expanding and they're not being as efficient with their time. Like I sell, for example, a lot of board games, toys, tarot cards, cross stitch, and I'm always cameras, and I'm always looking at the same areas, and I need to expand that, but not just expand it randomly, expand it in terms of like what actually sells, what's worth my time to spend that time to cherry pick for me.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna comment on a couple of those points. So first of all, I think I kind of do the same thing. You're in a thrift store environment, but what I do is to learn is I'll walk through many times. I'll just set up my booth. I'll have a coffee, set up my booth. It might take me 20 minutes or so because I'll pre-tag the items. It's only one box or something. And then I'll grab my coffee and walk around the store, and I'll look at items, and I'll see items that are unique to me, and I'll look at the prices, and I'll try to see what people are asking for them, that kind of stuff, names, just kind of getting ideas of what sells. But I also think that it's important to expand and be eclectic, because times change, values will change, items will lose some of their desirability, which mostly just affects the price. But I like those rare items. I like a lot of art kind of things. I think some of the just old items with some little bit of patina on them is art themselves. And when you take them out of that environment and you put them in a home environment,
Yeah.
it really pop the room in a lot of cases, right?
And
So
a
I
lot
love
of
that kind of stuff.
yeah, and that a lot of stuff comes from your gut too, eventually over time.
It
It's much
does.
harder to figure out what's artistic and what's just a piece of junk.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And junk sells too. Don't get me wrong.
junk sells well, and,
Junk
like,
will
weird
sell well,
things
but you got to be
sell.
careful. You don't want to become a junk booth. You know what I mean, or a junk
Yeah,
store.
yeah. I
But
think, like, I'll go through the booths too when I'm at the antique market where I have my stuff, and I'll get hints that way as well of what to look for, like you said. I think another thing what I like to do on occasion is if I'm looking at an online auction, especially somewhere like Max Sold that is much more not professional auctions, what I'll do is I'll order it from highest bid to lowest bid, and everything that goes me go what the when I look at how much it's going for is often a hint of those hidden little niches that you might not know about. So I do that sometimes as well, and it's like because often you'll see stuff that you walked by 100 times, and you're like, "Wait a second, that's worth $100," and you'll
yeah,
have no idea,
and
right?
some of it can be old and collectible, but it doesn't look old too. Like I know pottery,
Yeah,
some of it can look brand new, but it could be
pottery's hard. Yeah,
100 or so years old, right, or more. So, but pottery can have some really good value, right?
yeah.
Glass, you got to really watch for chips and
Glass and pottery, if you're
stuff.
new, I'd stay away from because it's unless you're an expert because
Well,
it,
I agree with you, Carl,
right,
but you only become an expert by learning, and sometimes there's a learning curve. Sometimes there's school of hard knocks.
right.
Do not invest a lot of money on it. That's what I would say. But
Yeah,
don't
I
be
think
afraid if you get to a sale and something interests you and you want to look it up.
yeah.
I wouldn't be afraid to spend $1 or $2 on something.
It's $1 or $2, but you just have to be careful it doesn't go into your junk pile or your death pile or whatever, because that stuff takes like the other aspect of when I'm looking to decide what to buy is how much research it takes to understand that market. So like glass is a pretty good example because a lot of it's not marked. And I'll look at something and I'll have no idea who even made that product, right? So I think it depends on your interest, of course, and like how much that item is. But for me, for new people, I would say like pay attention to how easy is it going to be to ship it if you're shipping on eBay. It doesn't require any testing because a lot of electronics can be really valuable but require testing. For example, Walkmans I won't pick up unless I can get good money for them for just parts. I've learned that the hard way over and over again. Does it require a lot of cleaning? And is there a chance for hidden damage? Or sometimes what happens is you'll buy something that's missing a critical part. So those are all aspects of what makes me decide what I want to sell online. Sometimes I don't mind, like board games. I have to count all the pieces. They're often missing pieces, but I don't mind because I kind of enjoy it. And if it's worth $50 to $100 or more, then I'll pick it up. If it's worth 20, I won't. As opposed to like, I don't know, a cross stitch that sells for $15, I might actually buy because it's sealed and requires no work. So I take all that into account as well.
Yeah. So when I say like buy pottery and stuff like that, I'm definitely not saying go out and fill the truck up with pottery on a weekend
No,
because you
no,
want to
no.
learn it. But I am saying like flip it upside down. If you see a stamp mark and it kind of looks oldish to you, don't get a ton of crazing, although crazing sometimes is just part of it, and maybe you want to grab it just to learn on it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But you definitely want to disclose that. But what I mean is like look for makers marks, look for unique items. Any like something made in Germany sometimes can have some interesting values. Then I'm not necessarily even saying it's got to be $1,000 or $100. Like there's a lot of pottery out there for 30, 40, $50 value. But if you're picking it up for $1, but I'm just saying for me, I want to expand my knowledge. So every now and then I will start gravitating towards an item that I normally would walk by, so I can learn about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. You're paying for education. If it's cheap enough, it's okay. And if you're not going to just like put it in a corner like I will, that's good too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's face it. If I buy something that I like because I think it has a really nice light to it, and I'm paying $1 for it, I'm probably going to be able to get $5 to $10 out of the booth for it, no matter
Yeah,
what it is. It's just
yeah,
because of the aesthetic look for it. But you develop an eye of what people like. You know what I mean? And it's usually not streamlined stuff. It's oddball looking stuff. You know what I mean?
yeah,
It's abstract kind of stuff that people kind of like. It's a lot of times it's things that are unique and it's a one off. It's not like you're going to find a bunch of that kind of stuff. A lot of it is mid-century modern stuff. So some of it can have good money and a lot of it doesn't really have great money, but it's all desired to some degree. So kind of learn that kind of stuff. You start remembering names, you start remembering looks, and you can identify things. Like if I look at a spaghetti dog, ceramic
yeah,
spaghetti dog,
yeah.
I think those things are ugly. You know what I mean? I would never pick those up, but
Yeah.
I've learned they actually carry some really good values, and
Some people really want that stuff. Yeah,
I've sold some of that kind of stuff for pretty decent money. You're looking at 40 to $60, and not even just dogs, but horses. But it's the spaghetti. It's the spaghetti technique, I guess, where clays, strands of clay that are spaghetti type size, and it comes in different thicknesses and stuff like this too. I don't want to get into a whole episode on spaghetti items, but it's spaghetti pottery type things, right? But the
yeah,
horse mane and tail was all spaghetti stuff, and I got really good money for a horse. It was, I forget the name of the horse now, but it was one of those kind of desired horses in that figure, and it
yeah,
sold for pretty good money. So I'm just saying, I would never have known that if you don't kind of take a chance on certain things, right?
yeah. I think work go with what works for you. I think I've always been a bit more of the online aspect, which is more technical maybe than gut, but gut I think is the way to go because you can't just if you can know what to bother picking up when you're out there without having to look it up, that's a big bonus.
Well, we're getting close to the end of the show here, Carl, but I just want to say, what kind of things are you looking to expand to now? What kind of things are kind of you're touching upon or you want to start looking for?
So one thing I've been paying a bit more attention to is the sell-through rate. And the sell-through rate, like I said before, is the ratio listing to selling. So as long as I can find it and it's not clothing, I don't like clothing, and I can ship it, then I gravitate towards that stuff. And so, for example, one thing that eBay has that's pretty good is they have a research tab called the Terra Peak Sourcing Insights. So I'm going to try and use that a bit more to actually come up with ideas. So, for example, I just did it just to see, and one it showed two categories, well, a lot of categories, but two of them I agree with immediately: pixel chicks and digital cameras. So I will use that more to figure out new categories. But I really am interested in the stuff that has higher value, and so I'm going to gravitate more towards that. Chat GPT is also another great way to figure out categories to go into. But if you're asking me which direction I want to go, it is towards the higher end valuable stuff, I think, because I do bypass that because I don't know. Did that answer the question?
Well, I think it does. I think the last little bit is confusing to me a little bit, and I'm going to say why, because
Yeah.
I'm not downplaying your answer, but to me, like you said, higher end items, but how are you going to know what the higher end items without taking chances on a few things?
Through research on eBay.
Okay, so this is again, you're very technical, and I'm very gut instinct, I guess, like that, right? So I'll grab things that I think look right, and I think I personally kind of feel out in my eyes, I guess. And I'll take a chance on them if the price is right and research them later. And you're very technical where you want to know that information before you go out there. So, like,
And I think the reason for that is you selling in the booth.
Yeah,
Like
100%.
if I
100%.
if I
Yeah.
pick up a bunch of stuff that sells for the $5 to $10 range, I I don't have anywhere for that to go. Like I can put that in my little tiny booth, but really it's not the best place even there because there's just not enough room, right?
100% absolutely correct. I agree.
So the reason I do the cherry picking more is because for online, I think I really don't like selling things for less than 15 or $20 American if I can avoid it. There's some
Right.
exceptions to that, like postcards, but that's like an asterisk. Um, that's why I don't generally will buy bulk and take a chance. I'm not saying I won't. I'm just saying it's not where my energy is being put.
Right. So one of the things I'm actually starting to look into, a couple things here, is clothing, and I've discussed this with you before. Um, but I'll have to look those things up. Those are things I have to look up.
Right.
But another thing I'm starting to look into, and I will buy a bunch of it, and I'll explain why. So if I can get a bunch of it at an estate sale and it's fairly cheap and expensive, or even at auctions, although auctions tend to get overpriced because a lot of people, a lot of ladies are there looking for that costume jewelry. But I can still grab it at yard sales. What I can do two things. I can go through it, look for like Trafari or Sherman brands or Keys or different brands, right? And I can just put in a jar lot everything else. I can look for gold, I can look for sterling, and everything else goes into a jar. And I can do a jar lot, set it in the booth for $10, and somebody will come by and buy that jar of jewelry for $10. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So clothing and jewelry are things that I'm starting to dabble in a little bit more. And the clothing is harder than you think because there's condition, there's all sorts of aspects, and then it's brand labels. And I know nothing about brand labels, but I categorize shoes in that. But because I'm on eBay now, that allows me that opportunity to sell that stuff. Although some of the old vintage clothing can still be sold out of the booth, and I'm going to put a section on clothing in my booth, mostly jackets. But yeah, so clothing and costume jewelry are a few things I'm looking to dabble in and learn.
Yeah, like for me, clothing, it's not an interest of mine, but also I don't like the measurements aspect. I don't like the sizing aspect, but I know it is quite popular with t-shirts and stuff like that.
Yeah, so where I'm starting out is concert shirts, and they got to be vintage.
Yeah,
Um, I'll buy like really vintage 70s 80s, like maybe a sports team like MLB, Major League Baseball jacket, right, or a NASCAR jacket, snap on something very flashy, kind of it pops 70s or it pops 80s. Like you could just look at the colors and the design and you know what year that's from. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
So I'll gravitate to that. You know what? I was at an estate sale where I got the poker table and I bought a woman's wedding dress from like 1950s. I'm gonna put that in the booth and see what happens. I bought
Right.
two fur coats,
Yeah.
a fur hat, and it's almost like a blanket, but I think it's a lap. I think you put it like say you were at I don't know, a baseball game in the fall or something like that. It would be a fur lap blanket. Like it's not long blanket by any means.
Right.
It's probably 3 by 2, but it was something you would maybe place over your lap. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
great shape. They're real fur, and then they got silk linings and all this kind of stuff. Like they're in great shape. So those are things I'm starting to dabble in.
You want
But
to keep things interesting too. Like this new things also help me just keep an interest in the whole game as well. It's always good to add new stuff as well.
yeah, and
So that
if I learn clothing, shoes, costume jewelry, and
it costs your
oh,
jewelry. Yeah, that's
and fur coats, like
yeah.
you know what I mean? Like
You got the whole thing going on.
I just have everything going on, right? So, but that's what I love about this game. And
Yeah.
you can think, okay, hypothetically, let's say I think I know everything right now. Next week, there's going to be something else I didn't know. You know what I mean? So that
Yeah.
is constantly coming up. So I never ever think that I know everything. I know if you had a yardstick, I know millimeters a different dimension, but if you had a meter stick, I know like a millimeter. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's what
So
makes it fun. That's what
that's
makes it
what makes it fun. So I there's so much out there, and it constantly changes, and it constantly changes. And this is, I don't want to keep digressing, but I'm going to add one more thing here. It can change because people change in age. So things that were popular in the 80s are popular now because those people have money, but also people are now in their 30s that were born in the 90s. You know what I mean?
Dude, people in the 2000s, that stuff is collectible now. It's
Yeah.
scary.
So it constantly changes. Some things fall out a little bit of favor. Like I think trains kind of have gone down a lot, type thing. But there's so much out there that is gaining momentum all the time. So you're constantly forced to change, to be honest.
That's what makes it fun.
That's what makes it fun.
If anyone has any other suggestions, I would love to hear it in the comments, or any comments at all would be great.
Yeah, no, I agree too. We're on YouTube, Reseller Evolution, so you can leave comments there. We're also on Spotify. Check us out on Spotify. I think you can leave comments on Spotify. We're very new at this, so we haven't received any comments on Spotify yet, but we have got a couple on YouTube. So either way, check us out there. Every Friday, we upload a new episode about 10 a.m. in the morning. It's there, Eastern Standard Time, and check us out every Friday.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thanks, Carl. And thanks, everyone, for listening. And we look forward to your comments. Hit the subscriber button. And until next Friday, we'll see you later.
Bye.